So my wife and I had the chance to head down to Costa Rica this year for our 20th anniversary of all things. It's one incredible experience and one opportunity to do something like this. We were blown away by the nature, the beauty there, just the incredible sights. Like, you hear all these stories or you see all these videos of people saying how amazing it is, and it really is quite fantastic, quite amazing, especially coming from a non-tropical place like Utah and going there. So I just got some footage I want to share with you, but I also want to kind of talk about something else. So as you're looking at the footage, you're seeing the Blue Falls in Costa Rica, but I'm more interested in talking to you about something that's been coming up quite a bit in my recovery business, and that we find people coming who are generally coming in a humble place when they come into recovery. They show up and they have a good attitude. They work really hard, and something changes. So people start to grow. They hit a plateau, you want to call it that, and sometimes they start to go backwards, and sometimes they sit idle, and sometimes they go forward. And there's this theme that we see, and it's to me it's a form of complacency, or a pattern that repeats that maybe they're not even aware of, or people aren't aware of until it happens again. So I think of this as like a dysfunctional pattern. So if you look at a dysfunctional pattern, these patterns show up in our lives, they show up in our homes, where, for example, here's a dysfunctional pattern that is pretty common. A husband and wife, they have a disagreement, and the only way that they get out of this disagreement is by yelling or getting upset, or someone throws something and breaks something, or someone hurts the other person in some way, either emotionally or physically. So that pattern then has like a rebound point. So after they have this argument, this fight, there's a space of peace. You hear the term like make-up sex, right? There's a space of let's reconnect, let's reconcile, and let's rebuild this thing from the ashes and start over. That pattern is not functional. It's not sustaining. It's something that maybe can last in the short term, but it doesn't create a healthy dynamic of a relationship with husband and wife. These same kind of dysfunctional patterns flow into other areas of our life. So in the recovery industry, this might be, or even mental health industry, this might look like, all right, I relapsed, I messed up, I'm getting sober now, I'm doing better. I hit this point of rebound. I'm rebounding back, feeling content, I'm happy. But then life happens. So in life, there's usually triangles. There's me, you, and the thing. So that thing could be anger, it could be resentment, it could be some sort of trauma, it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, and it could have some other part to it that resets that dysfunctional pattern at the top, where now it's like, all right, the only way out of this is to relapse again, or to have a fight, or to be angry, or to have that emotional outburst and recreate the dysfunctional pattern. So there's a saying that goes along with this that kind of helps people get their mind in the right frame. Anything you put ahead of your recovery, you're going to lose. So essentially, anything you put before the energy and effort and work you're putting together for your recovery, you're just going to lose it anyway. Like, it's not going to stay with you. So how do we change our mindset to one that isn't dysfunctional? Well, patterns are learned over time, and patterns are learned through practice. So as you start to see this pattern in your life, and maybe you're not fully aware of it, but you're willing to look at it, you can start putting pieces in place and not do the old way. So the way a pattern is reinforced is through repetition over time and looking at it from a different perspective. So the perspective that is most effective is a perspective of gratitude. Because when you're in this relapse pattern or this anger pattern, you're actually in a state of pride. You're in a state of frustration. And whether that frustration is because you just don't understand something about yourself, or it's something you haven't been able to figure out yet, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that you're in a state of frustration and pride. And in that pride state, your mind gets hijacked by all those emotions. They say in recovery, the strongest path to falling off the wagon or relapse is actually through resentment. So resentment's another form of pride. So how do we address resentment? We address it with gratitude. The gratitude piece creates humility. And it's been said that humility is a twin sister to gratitude. So if you're unaware of your pride, or if you are aware of your pride, either way, what you can do is put into place a practice of humility through gratitude. So every morning, every night, every day, be grateful. Pay attention to your life. Find ways to be grateful. Pay attention to the good, the beautiful, the things that are all around you and surrounding you. And make that your new space of living. And this will help you. I see this happen all the time, where all of a sudden someone adopts this mindset of, I'm grateful, and I'm going to come up with so many things I'm grateful for. They'll have a list, and they'll add to that list, and they'll just kind of change their whole way of being to one that's just grateful. Grateful for the life they have. And just here's kind of an extreme example of this. When you get to this space in your life where you feel like, man, I'm so unlucky, or I'm so unfortunate, or why do bad things keep happening to me? There's actually an opposite question you can ask yourself. You can say the opposite of, why have I been so fortunate for so long that only now are bad things happening to me? How does that sit? That's a little different. How come I'm so fortunate that I'm just now dealing with these consequences? And I know that can be reframed 100,000 ways, and you could turn it negative real fast if you want. But the nuts and bolts of it are, we tend to lean towards the negative. We tend to lean towards the assumption that everything is working against us. But in the backgrounds, there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of positive things you can see if you open your eyes to them. When you go on a hike and you see nature, you can see the little bugs, you can smell the smells, you can feel the cool breeze, the fresh air. You can pay attention to those things, but if your mindset's in one of pride or negativity or resentment, you won't see, hear, or smell anything but junk and poopy smells. So what you really need to look at is, am I willing to accept that this dysfunctional pattern no longer serves me? That whatever these dysfunctional patterns are, they no longer serve me. And am I willing to seek a pattern that can serve me and can benefit my life? Am I willing to make a change? Like Michael Jackson says, look in the mirror. Am I willing to make a change and do it differently? So another example I see is, and this happens a lot, we'll have people come into our program and they'll share in groups and say, well, I do it my way. I know how things work. I know me better. And they don't really want to listen to anyone else's perspective. They have their own mind made up. And oftentimes they'll have anger outbursts, or they'll leave group, or they won't engage with the group in a healthy way. And they really lose a great opportunity. And then you have the other types where they recognize that mistake and they seek to change. They seek to improve. But you can't get out of a pattern until you're aware of your weaknesses, or the parts that are falling apart and causing these things to go. And a lot of us have learned dysfunctional patterns. We're raised in homes that maybe had dysfunctional patterns. We've been in relationships with dysfunctional patterns. And they just don't necessarily go away. And I'll share one last example and I'll wrap this up. We've got some close people in our lives that we witness their children, and they have these children in their lives where they've yelled at them, they've hit them, they've pulled on their ears, they've slapped their heads, and they've just been really aggressive with them for years and years and years. And it's been really hard to watch. And their kids are just wonderful kids, but they repeat a lot of the same patterns. And recently we had a family event where one of their kids was doing all the same things the parent did to one of my kids. And it was really sad and heartbreaking to see that pattern is being passed down. You don't want to be that parent. You don't want to be that parent that passes down dysfunction. I know I don't. I've had my experiences with it too, in my own home growing up. And I pass down some of that to my own kids. I'm not without flaw, and I make mistakes all the time. And I'm not trying to judge my family either that did that. It was just really heartbreaking to see my son getting hurt by their son that was hurt by their parents. So those patterns don't just disappear. You don't just walk away from them. And there's a moment after where maybe their family was closer because they could bond over the event of, oh, those kids are just wimps or something. Like using some sort of language to dismiss the bad behavior, and then the family's all closer, while they use us as the example of yuppies or soft children or whatever it is. And that's part of that triangulation, is you can bond over bad behavior. Another word for that is trauma bonding, and put other people on the outside. Well, that only works until you run out of fuel for your flame. So you stop hanging out with family, you stop hanging out with friends, you stop hanging out with other people. At the end of the day, all of a sudden it's just you and your own. Well, then you and your own have those really bad fights. Who do you triangulate over? Does mom and dad just hate on the children? Does child and mom hate on the dad? Does the dad and son hate on the mom? That dysfunctional pattern of grabbing someone else and pulling them in doesn't just go away. And unfortunately, if you don't learn it, when you go have your own family, get married, have kids later, you're going to repeat those patterns too. You don't just forget them. So, message of the day. My main thing, if you take away one thing from this lesson, is if you have or are aware or not even aware of dysfunctional patterns, learn to change them through gratitude. Become grateful for your life. Change your whole way of being so that when you are experiencing heightened negative emotions or difficult situations, you can be grateful. You can say, I've been so grateful. I'm so grateful. I've been through so much. I'm so blessed for the life I have. So that reframe alone, when practiced over time, can help you change everything about your life. It puts you in a state of humility and a state of growth. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, and if you found this useful, please share.